me read this one more time. Alright. Tank the first one. If unmessable, add spawn, kill them. Split at 50% with AE. Avoid damage if possible. Slow debuff and split. Burn one. If unmessable, add spawn, kill them. Okay, that sounds simple. Greetings from Deal. We're here about a day and a half before the Veil of Alaris expansion, and I'm going to go through what we do on a TLP server. So this is mainly for players that are interested in returning to the game after having taken a break for considerable time, or P99 players that want to see expansions beyond Scars of Velius. There are two websites that are used right before a new expansion drops. If you're in sort of going past Classic Kunark Velius and you're about to go into Lucklin and beyond, highly recommend this website, EQ Progression. It's run by this guy Kazan, who's done a great service for the community. Highly recommend you support his website, YouTube channel. He's got all kinds of information here, from trade skills to the epics, but I would say for the most utility that I get out of this would be raid strategies. But yeah, definitely I've used these epic guides for 3 different epics, and it's great when you click safe. He basically goes through plate, chain, leather, and silk. So for example, if you click on Bard, just very quickly, click on Epic 1.0, he'll go over a pre-farm list. So you can, some players find it more efficient to go through a pre-farm list and collect items, collect these items before they start through the Epic 1.0. And so, you know, you collect pre-farmable items, then start the Epic. Very, very efficient. He gives maps and extensive details, locations, what you need, when you need it. Very, very useful. Flagging. Flagging's really important. We don't talk about flagging enough. You know, he has the classic Kunark Velius flagging, which we all know about, but then he also goes into the Lucklin flag, which eventually gets you into Vexthal, the endgame zone. Planes of Power. This is, I think, one of the hardest part of the Planes of Power expansion is getting your flags right for an entire raid. Remember, an entire raid needs to be flagged before they can get into Plane of Time. He also goes through LDON, which the flagging's not too hard for that. But then there's the Gates of Discord flagging and Omens of War flagging. These are, I think, just absolutely critical. That's very, very important, but I'd say these raid strategies are important. Just a few closing thoughts on going through Omens of War and Dragons of Norath. I would say once you leave the Velius era and you go to Lucklin, the raid strategies change. You definitely leave the era of the tank and spank fight and you move to much more intricate strategies. The penultimate example of this in the Lucklin era, I think, would be Emperor Sra. This is a highly technical fight, and I would challenge anyone on P99. Take your guild to a TLP server in the Lucklin era and try this fight. Obviously, you'd have to work up to him, and it requires King just to get to him. Just to give you a little rundown on this fight, the first thing is that Emperor Sra starts off. He's on a 10-minute timer. He's completely untargetable from the outset of the fight. You have to kill his proxy, called the Blood of Sra. Once you kill him, then it starts a 10-minute timer, plus or minus, I believe, a 1 or 2 minute variance. So sometimes he spawns earlier than 10 minutes, sometimes a little later. But yeah, so you kill his proxy, starts the timer. After that timer has elapsed, then he becomes targetable. But once you kill the Blood of Sirah is surrounded by these 8 named Shizar. 4 of the Shizar need to be mezzed, so they're brought to one of these rooms, these adjacent rooms, and mezzed, and they need to be locked down for the duration of the fight. The other 4 mobs have to be off-tanked, and so they're generally brought to a different room and off-tanked for the duration of the raid. So that includes the time after the Blood of Sirah has been killed, and so that entire 10 minutes that you're waiting for Emperor Sirah to go active. Once Emperor Sirah goes active, they still have to be mezzed and off-tanked respectively. Generally, you need 4 dedicated off-tanks, off-tanking the off-tankable mobs, and dedicated enchanters that are chain mezzing the mobs. You need mana for this fight. Sometimes what you do is you bring one mob from the Sirah basement, and you use him as a mana battery to tap him, so to keep your casters topped up on mana, because mana does become an issue in this fight. Once the timer is elapsed, then you move Emperor Sirah from his spawn area to the raid engage area. Emperor Sirah has he is not Avatar of War, so it's key. This is not a tank and spank fight, and so you need a very, very slow and controlled burn. He has this effect called a tank buster, which basically dramatically reduces aggro on the main tank, so you need a ramp tank rotation, so that requires some coordination. So this is a lot of moving parts, and what you have to do is in a very slow and controlled fashion, bring Emperor Sirah down. He cannot be slowed. He basically cannot be slowed. There are some reports of using a clicky on him that has a very small percentage of working. I believe that's a cold-based slow that might work on him. That requires a drop out of North Temple of Vishan, I think. But generally speaking, for all intents and purposes, he can't be slowed. He hits really hard. You got to watch your DPS on him. You can't just go in with guns blazing. So this is, one of these raids, once you leave the classic era, where you have to change your thinking with respect to how you engage these raid bosses. And this is a great example. Another example of this is in Plains of Power. What was it? It was Plane of Earth B, Wrath Council. Just looking at this just gives me palpitations. So this is another one of these fights where you can't just go in and kill everything. It's impossible to do. Generally, the way this is done is you'd have to collect all of these council members and keep them mezzed. You need at least 6 enchanters to basically keep all of these Wrath Councilmen mezzed and locked down. Once they're locked down, you have to go in a circle and kill all these elementals. You basically need to kill the elementals before the enchanters run out of mana. Then after all the elementals are killed, you kill the Wrath Councilmen one at a time, and then there's a final elemental, an earth elemental, that spawns at the end of that. This is an extremely hard fight. So yeah, I would challenge anybody on Project 1999. Come over to this raid strategy page on EQ Progression, go to Plains of Power, read through this Wrath Council fight, and see if you can do this. I would highly recommend anybody, especially if a guild is interested in making the move, making the jump over to a TLP, read through this and see if you can take on this new challenge. I believe these fights will challenge you in a way you've never been challenged before. So that's pretty much all I have to say on up through Omens of War. When you leave Omens of War and you start progressing beyond Omens of War, then you have to start thinking about this page called Rasper's Repository, another excellent source for EQ players on a TLP. Basically, you start in Omens of War DON, Gates of Discord, Omens of War DON. Give the same information that you'll get on EQ Progression. There'll be some redundancies here, but I would generally read about both say for example you go into Omens of War, they stratify it by zone. So when you click on main Omens of War page, you start in Tyrannic Scar, level 49 zone, going all the way up to Riftseeker's Sanctum, level 70 zone. You have a level cap increase. When we click on spells, this is how you get your level 66 to level 70 spells. A very important thing to pay attention to is you go to your class, and I'm a rogue, so you click on rogue. See, level 66 requires this minor Miramite rune, and level 68 requires a Miramite rune. So the minor would give me this imperceptible discipline, and the Miramite would give me deadly aim. But the lesser Miramite rune, which gives a level 67 spell, at level 67, rogues have no spells at this level. So this is another important reason to review this stuff, is a lesser Miramite rune doesn't give a rogue a spell. So that means a rogue should not bid on this item. So this tells you what not to bid on. If you loot this by accident, or if you don't know what you're doing, you can basically take this away from another class who needs it. So for example, a ranger has 4 different spells, and he needs a lesser Miramite rune for each of those level 67 spells. This ancient Miramite rune, this is a raid drop. Again, a rogue doesn't get an ancient tome, so it's pointless for them to bid on it. A ranger, for example, does get an ancient spell. So, it's important to go through this to know what not to bid on, as much as it is to know what items to bid on. Speaking of items, when you go to, that was spells, you can go click from there to raid dropped gear, and click from there to raid quested gear. So when you click under quested armor, it tells you group gear and raid gear. These are quests you can do for armor drops. And the only one I remember from this area, because this is about 2 years ago, is J-Rook's Vest. When you click J-Rook's Vest, it'll take you to the mob who drops it, the percentage chance that he'll drop it. Generally, he drops 2 per raid. Sometimes he'll drop, sometimes he won't drop it, but not very often. Oftentimes he at least drops 1. Sometimes he'll drop 2 of these. This is a very highly bid on item. And each class is going to need for their, whether you're a plate class, chain, leather, or cloth, you're going to need J-Rook's Vest for the best in slot chest piece. You're going to combine that. If you're a plate class, you're going to combine that with a ceremonial candle. If you're chained, you need a Kiv short bow. You're going to do a combine to make the final piece. When you go to your respective class, in this case rogue, you get whispering armor, right? The armor is called whispering, and when you go over to the chest link, click it, you get a whispering tunic of shadows. This gives an AC 50, 10 hit point regeneration, armor class on 102. It has 2 slots that can be augmented: an ornamentation slot, slot 21, and a slot type 8, a raid slot. So you need a type 8 slot 1 to augment this. 2 focus effects. You have a full weakening, which weakens your target, makes them more susceptible to melee attacks for 24 seconds, and it increases your offensive skills by 20%. Very nice. Second focus effect is Fury of the Duelist, which will increase the duration of the Duelist discipline by 6 seconds, so you get more DPS indirectly, but also directly. So that right there is the quested armor, the raid piece. And that's from Omens of War. Let's just skip ahead to House of Thule. When we click on House of Thule, this is the content we're currently on. And you have raid instances, static zones, miscellaneous. Miscellaneous, again, will give you group gear, raid gear, right? Visible gear, group progression, raid progression, tasks, what faction you need, how you get spells, achievements, unlocking mercenaries. What the heck is this? So pretty much once you click on your respective expansion, you click on miscellaneous to get quick links to wherever you need to go. Under raid instances, the way I use this is I'll bring this up in a window and I'll minimize my EQ window and bring this up as my raid approaches each of these targets. So let's just click on Sanctus Somnium. You have all of these targets. There's Essence of Dreams. Let's go Under the Sea. Under the Sea is great. There's 2 phases. There's a phase where you have these sharks. It's underwater, and you have sharks that need to be kited in a circle, either by a Shadow Knight or a Paladin. And as they're being kited, you have various sea creatures that are brought into the raid by the puller. This includes the Kraken, a hammerhead shark, a great white shark, anglerfish. So you kill each of these sea life creatures. Then once you kill all these sea life creatures, as these sharks are being kited around, then you have phase 2, which has these different effects. There's a drowning phase, a vortex phase, a tail slap, and a devastating wound. The most important thing is the drown phase, which negates water breathing. So what this means is you have to kill the deep sea Leviathan, the final boss, in this Under the Sea event before 4 minutes has elapsed. If 4 minutes elapses and you haven't killed the Leviathan, everybody in the entire raid drowns. And the way you do is once you kill the deep sea Leviathan, then the entire raid gets an AETL, area effect translocate, back to your spawn point, and then you go through the loot. So it's important to know the raid mechanics of where you're going. This is one example, and it also gives you items that he drops. The Dagger of the Pernicious. This is an interesting drop. I think Deal has this. It has a modifying backstab, and I think it has a Force of Magic, which is a magic-based 320 damage magic-based proc. Oh, this is pretty nice. Another one, I really like Elements of a Dream. This is a fascinating event where you have phase 0, which is a setup. There's 2 parts of phase 1, a puzzle phase where you have members of your raid that are working on a puzzle, and a combat phase of phase 1. Then you have phase 2, which has a puzzle phase and a combat phase, right? And then you have phase 3, which has a puzzle phase and a combat phase, and then phase 4, which is strictly a combat phase. So a lot of moving parts here. The main takeaways from this is during these puzzle phases, you have to have the players in the combat phase protect the members of the raid that are doing these puzzles. And so it's really important that they be protected. There's various strategies that you use to protect them. And in phase 4, there's a very specific way that you engage the final boss. This particular fight does drop the best in slot for the rogue, this Lipes Piercer, which a pretty sweet weapon. It has slightly better damage delay than the last weapon. Basically, as the raid is going through each of these events, you pull it up either in windowed mode or in a separate tab, however you do it, and read about the event as you're doing it. Read about what drops, what you should and should not bid on. So the raid instances part of these websites, and the raid strategies I think are probably the most important, most useful. So what I'm going to do with that, I'm going to go into Veil of Alaris and learn about the main VOA page, group gear, raid gear, visible armor, and I'm going to do the same thing I've been doing since Mangler dropped, and learn about the raid instance. We're going to start this raid, I believe, Thursday. We're going to do this raid, learn all about it. So yeah, definitely when you're, this is what we do on a TLP. You learn about raids and you try and take out this content. Ideally, you want to get through the end stage content and kill the last boss in era. That's the main mission of a TLP server. So anyways, I hope you guys found that useful. And definitely I'll leave hyperlinks to these websites in the link in the description. Alrighty, enjoy.